It's 2 a.m. and you're still scrolling. Another stock tip, another chart with an arrow shooting straight up. Someone in the comments swears this one's different, that this is the one you can't afford to miss. You felt this before, that itch to move fast, to catch the wave before it's gone. But here's something worth sitting with for a second. The most successful investor alive now didn't get there chasing tips at 2 a.m. He's sitting on roughly $150 billion, built over more than 6 decades, and he never once needed a hot pick to get there. No secret ticker, no inside information. Just a method so unglamorous that most people scroll right past it without noticing. So what did he actually do instead? Stick around, because the answer isn't what you'd expect. And it starts with something he did when he was 11 years old. Picture 1942 Omaha. An 11-year-old boy has saved $120 from delivering newspapers and reselling Coke bottles one at a time. His father works as a stockbroker, and the boy has been watching the numbers on that office chalkboard for years now, waiting patiently for his turn. Now he walks in and does something most 11-year-olds never think to do. He buys stock. 6 shares of an oil company called City Service Preferred, split evenly with his older sister, Doris, at just over $38 a share. Almost immediately, the price drops. Not a little. It falls all the way to $27, and his sister reminds him about it every single day. He doesn't sell. He waits. When the price finally climbs back to $40, he takes the small profit and gets out, relieved. Then he watches from the sidelines as that same stock keeps climbing, past $100, past $200. He'd left real money on the table, and he knew it. That single afternoon taught him something most people spend a lifetime learning the expensive way. Patience beats speed. Notice what mattered. It wasn't the size of the 6 shares. It was that he stuck around long enough to feel the cost of leaving too early. You don't need your first move to be a big one. You need one you're willing to sit with, patient enough to actually learn from it. That lesson ended up worth more than the money itself. That patience he learned at 11 years old, sitting with a stock he wanted to sell too early, didn't disappear once the lesson ended. Instead, it turned into something quieter and far less exciting to watch. He started reading, not casually, but by the truckload, 5 daily newspapers, a fair number of magazines, and eventually company annual reports and regulatory filings most adults find unbearably dry. By the time he was managing serious amounts of other people's money, he was spending roughly 5 to 6 hours of every single working day just reading, something like 80% of the hours he had available to him. No conference calls stacked back to back, no inbox to clear, just him, a chair, and a pile of paper most people would call boring. And that's exactly the point of it. He's compared the habit directly to compound interest, saying knowledge builds the same way money does, slowly and quietly, in a way you genuinely cannot see day to day, until the gap between someone who did it and someone who didn't becomes impossible to ignore. Here's the identity shift most people miss entirely, because it works against everything social media rewards. The people who actually build wealth consistently don't look busy. They don't look like they're hustling in every photo, phone in one hand, coffee in the other. They look, frankly, a little bit bored. They're reading a filing nobody asked them to read, twice, before anyone else in the room has finished skimming it once. If you're waiting to feel excited before you build a habit like this one, you'll probably be waiting a very long time. The excitement isn't in the reading itself. It's in what that quiet, unglamorous stack of reading compounds into, years later, long after nobody is watching. Reading builds the knowledge, but knowledge on its own has never protected anyone from a bad decision made in a hurry. And this is exactly where his most famous rule comes in. He calls it margin of safety. And instead of explaining it with formulas, he explains it with a picture almost anyone can hold on to. Imagine you're driving a truck that weighs close to 10,000 pounds, and you come to a bridge with a sign that clearly says its limit is exactly that, 10,000 pounds. You could cross it, technically, and the math would work. But you don't, because you can't be completely certain about the math, the bridge, or anything else that might go wrong that day. So instead, you drive a little further down the road, find a bridge rated for 20,000 pounds, and that's the one you actually take. Same destination, same truck, but suddenly you're not betting your safety on being exactly right. Now picture two different people on the very same day, in the very same market, looking at the exact same stock. One of them buys right at the edge of what they can afford, certain the price only goes up from here. The other buys well below what they believe the business is actually worth, on purpose, leaving room for being wrong. 6 months later, the market drops the way markets sometimes do. The first person panics, sells at a loss, and tells everyone the market is rigged. The second person barely reacts, because they built in room for exactly this. Same event, same market, two completely different outcomes, and the difference wasn't luck. It was the size of the gap they left themselves before they ever pressed buy. That gap is the whole rule. Growth was never really about being right every single time. It's about surviving the times you're wrong, comfortably enough that one bad guess doesn't quietly undo years of good ones. That's the real line between growing your money and simply gambling with it, rarely as dramatic as either word tends to make it sound. Margin of safety is what protects the money you already have, the cushion that keeps one bad call from wiping you out. But it doesn't explain why some businesses and some people keep growing decade after decade while others quietly plateau or shrink. For that, he uses a different picture entirely, a castle and a moat around it. Capitalism, he says, is basically a lineup of people trying to take your castle. If you sell a great product, someone builds a better one. If you run a great restaurant, someone copies your menu, offers better parking, and hires away your best chef. That's just how competition works, and pretending otherwise doesn't make it less true. What separates the businesses that survive from the ones that get picked apart is the moat, some durable advantage that's genuinely hard to copy. Sometimes that moat is simply being the cheapest producer in the room, able to survive a price war that would sink a smaller rival. Sometimes it's raw talent nobody else has, the way a heavyweight champion keeps winning fights simply because nobody in the room can outfight him yet. He points to Coca-Cola as the clearest example, a company now selling over 2.2 billion servings a day, and says the real danger for any great business isn't a competitor, it's resting on its own success and forgetting to stay hungry. Translate that to your own money, and the moat isn't a company you own. It's whatever makes your financial position harder to copy or disrupt. It could be a specific skill nobody else in your field has bothered to actually learn well. It could be a lifestyle built cheap enough that a bad month doesn't wreck you. Or it could simply be discipline most people around you don't have the patience to keep up for long. The moat doesn't have to be dramatic, and it rarely is. Just has to be real, and it has to be defended on purpose every single year, the exact same way, whether you're earning $10 or $10 million a year. Here's something that actually happened just this year, and it puts everything you've heard so far to a real test. On January 1st, 2026, Greg Abel became CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, ending Warren Buffett's 60-year run at the top of the company he built. At the first shareholder meeting after the handoff, the crowd raised what was basically a giant jersey into the rafters of the arena, the number 60 stitched across the front of it, marking 6 full decades spent as CEO of the company. Buffett didn't run the meeting that day. He sat on the floor with the rest of the board, while Abel took the questions instead. You'd reasonably expect a moment like that to shake things up. New leader, new instincts, maybe a completely different playbook. It didn't happen that way. Abel said publicly, more than once, that he wasn't changing Berkshire's approach to investing, the one he'd learned directly from Buffett over years of working alongside him, and months later, the actual numbers backed that claim up. The philosophy held. Here's the versus moment worth sitting with. Titles always change eventually. People retire, step back, and hand over the keys. Every single time, no exceptions. Principles, if you actually build them properly in the first place, Don't need the original person standing there to keep working. That's really the entire test of whether a system is genuinely solid or whether it was just one person quietly getting lucky for a very long stretch of time. That principle survived a changeover in leadership because it was built to survive the one thing that actually kills growth. And it isn't a bad market or a bad year. It's complacency. He spent years studying once great businesses that eventually collapsed, and the pattern behind their failure is almost always the same. It's rarely a single disaster. It's a slow, comfortable drift where the people running things simply stopped feeling like somebody out there was chasing them. He describes the opposite mindset as restlessness, a belief that tomorrow should be more exciting than today, and that you should be competing exactly as hard once you've made it as you did before anyone knew your name. Here's where this gets uncomfortable for a lot of people watching this. That same complacency shows up in personal finances constantly, just wearing a different outfit. It's called lifestyle creep. You get a raise, and instead of the gap between what you earn and what you spend growing wider, it quietly stays the same or shrinks because your spending crept up right alongside your income. New car, bigger apartment, nicer everything, one small upgrade at a time, each one easy to justify on its own. Nobody sits down and decides to sabotage their own progress. It happens in tiny, forgivable feeling steps, the same way a great company doesn't collapse in one bad quarter. It drifts there over several very comfortable years. The habits that actually build wealth and the habits that quietly protect it turn out to be the same habits, just aimed in slightly different directions. Growth without some defense against your own comfort isn't really growth at all. It's just a countdown, dressed up to look like progress, waiting for the moment your income stops rising and your spending doesn't stop with it. So go back for a second to that 2 a.m. scroll from the very beginning and the open loop that's been quietly sitting there this whole time. What did he actually do instead of chasing hot tips? Nothing dramatic at all, and that's really the entire point of this video. He read for 5 to 6 hours a day, most days for most of his life. He left himself margin, on purpose, so being wrong once wouldn't wipe out years of being right. He built something durable enough that competitors couldn't easily copy it, and defended it instead of resting on it. And when the title changed hands this year, none of it needed him standing there to keep working. That's the actual opposite of a hot tip. It's just slow, repeatable, occasionally boring discipline, stacked for decades. And here's the proof it wasn't really about the money at all. Of the roughly $150 billion he built, he's already given away more than $68 billion of it, mostly to a single foundation, with a promise to eventually give away almost all the rest. The habits built the fortune. What he did with it says something else entirely. Here's the real question worth sitting with for a second. Out of everything you just heard, reading daily, leaving yourself margin, building something hard to copy, staying restless instead of comfortable, which one are you actually missing right now? Not which one sounds nicest. Which one, honestly, you've actually been skipping? Drop it in the comments. One word is fine. And if this kind of breakdown is useful to you, stick around because the next video takes apart a completely different rule from a completely different investor, the same way, piece by piece, starting right where this one left off.